All right. Again, welcome. As I said yesterday, my name's Glenn Smith, and been a long time business consultant. And these Bezlio guys, I used to know them as young whippersnappers, and now I'm on the other end of the spectrum. I may be the oldest one. It's probably between you and me as to who's out front and leading the pack here. But we've been around a while, right? All right. Not done yet. All right. So we're going to talk about sales engineer. And what does it mean to be a sales engineer from our vernacular or from the Bezlio world? So let's just go ahead and go down through here. And as I noted yesterday, if you have questions, please feel free to jump in here. But when I found out that I was going to do the presentation, thanks to Keith, on this as well, I sort of volunteered and I said, okay, let's go do a little legwork and let's talk about what it means to be a sales engineer and how we're going to come alongside and work with you. Some of you, such as Tim and a few others, we've had the opportunity to rub shoulders and dialogue over some of the issues, questions, solutions, things like that. So what is the ultimate purpose of a sales engineer? It's to be a part of the sales team in selling the product, and yet they have a slightly differentiated purpose, specific to their technological expertise, uncovering and resolving the concerns of potential customers by demonstrating the technical value of their solution. Solution being Bezlio. How are we going to roll this out? How are we going to incorporate that? And as I shared yesterday, especially with the shipping bezels, how we approached that and satisfied that customer solution. There's been quite a few in the Bezlio world that we've done this to, and I can certainly step out of take my Bezlio hat off and put on my business consulting hat and share with you numerous ones that I've dealt with over the years. What are the responsibilities? And there's a number of them, and I'm just going to go down through here. You can, if you want this slide presentation, I'm sure we'll make it available, but we serve customers by identifying their needs, engineering adaptation of products, equipment, and services. We're a problem solver. We have product knowledge. We identify and sell to the customer's needs. We identify software requirements. We have to be able to understand product development. What does that mean? And without being a developer, have presentation skills, have general programming skills, and I think you, the gentleman from OTC, you went back and mentioned some old software that we used to develop in, Fortran, etc. Some of those from the distant past. We have to have some programming skills. And that would certainly help us in our work. Technical understanding, as well as verbal communication. How do we communicate both verbally and written? And then a requirement analysis. We have to also be innovative. We have to think outside the box. As I've said numerous times in my years of consulting, you're only limited by your creativity. If you are creative, you can resolve that. What are the duties? Identify current and future customer service and requirements by establishing personal rapport. Sometimes that's not the easiest thing to do, especially if you're working in a remote environment, is developing a rapport with potential and actual customers and other persons in the position to understand and service requirements. Duties provides product, service, or equipment, technical, and engineering information by answering questions and requests. Establishing new accounts. Sometimes that's who do we bring to the table. And I have a situation right now I'm working with where it was a quite by accident type of a situation where a customer came or prospect came and said, "Hey, here's my situation, here's my issue," and so utilizing my background, he's going to become a Bezlio customer. Cost estimates, studying blueprints, plans, related customer documents, consulting with engineers, architects, and other professional and technical personnel. Determines improvements by analyzing cost-benefit ratios. You can read this as much as I can in what are the duties? One of the things is we gain customer acceptance by explaining or demonstrating. Our ability to translate, if you will, so that the customer knows exactly what we're talking about and what we're going to bring to the table. Submits orders by conferring with technical support staff and doing cost engineering changes. Develops customer staff by providing technical information and training. Sometimes it's a matter of doing some training versus providing some technical information. Obviously, this is one that we have to be sensitive to, is that we are in compliance with our solution. And prepares sales engineering reports by collecting, analyzing, and summarizing sales information and engineering and application trends. MVP, no, it doesn't mean most valuable player, but it does mean minimum valuable product. And as I thought about this and as I prepared for this, what does that mean to have a minimum viable product? At the root of it is to meet the customer's expectation. But instead of sometimes trying to build the Taj Mahal, we need to go ahead and say, okay, let's start small. We've got to have a foundation. Then we put the floor on, and then we put the walls up and things like that. And so a minimum viable product is typically you come to that by discussion and by agreement. So the basic concept of MVP is that you've pared your product down to the absolute minimum set of features that you need to launch. Because one of the problems that you potentially face is, do I not launch? I mean, space travel and all that, if I go back to my early days, that was foreign, and now it's sort of commonplace. Well, if they had said we're going to go to Mars on day one and without going to the orbiting the Earth or the Moon or whatever, we would not have gotten there. So what is it that we need to launch? From the basic concept, you build, you add features to arrive at your completed product. So there's 4 Ds, and Adam shared this with me. There's discovery, there's design, there's develop, and then deploy/deliver. And if we look at those and take those sequentially and not concurrently, even though maybe some of this work can be done concurrently, we look at something like this. So from the discovery standpoint, we get onto a phone call and we say, okay, what process could be more efficient with mobile access? If that's what you're trying to resolve. It could be internal and not on a mobile platform. What would the perfect process be? Are there any unnecessary steps? And what are the ideal devices? We work with a number of devices, whether Android, iOS, web, etc. And so figuring out what those are is important. Do we have to go out and procure additional devices to make this work? So we've got the discovery and design, and then we go into the develop mode, focus on work that is modular, reusable, and utilizes consistent UX concepts. And then once we have that MVP, we then deploy, pilot with a small group, gather feedback, and refine. And a lot of times this is you take an individual or one small segment of the populace and you pilot that and figure out what are some things that we missed, that we didn't think about. The other day I took the shipping bezels and I took them out of the customer's environment and put them into our Bezlio development or demo, and lo and behold, came across a couple of issues that we didn't think about. And so I went back with the developer and said, hey, we missed a step here, or we have to do this in order to get there. So those are the things as part of the QA process and the testing and deployment process. Questions? All right. So let's do a little case study here, and we'll use the shipping bezel as an example. The first thing that happened is, well, there was the customer contacting us or us contacting the customer, regardless, that's what happened. Is we made contact and we discussed what were the issues they were looking to resolve. So we identified, typically through their input, what we're looking to resolve. We come up with a process flow such as this. How many of you work with flow charts? All right. Typically, we'll look at this, and in this case here, here's the flow chart of the picking bezel that said, all right, what comes first, the chicken or the egg, and then we flowed accordingly. And we had to deal with each one of the gotchas or the scenarios. And when we do it on paper like this, a lot of the legwork becomes a lot easier when we get to the development stage. Out of that, we wrote a design spec that the customer looked at, reviewed, agreed, and then we went into bezel development. In this case here, what started out with 4 bezels in their mind's eye, we pared it down to 3 bezels. You pick it, you build the shipment, and then you confirm the shipment. And in this case here, that's nothing more than the bezel panel with all 3 of them in one panel that I can access and execute. Bezel QA is very important, and it's sort of ongoing for the life of the product, especially when it comes to tweaking and making changes. And so looking at it from a QA standpoint, having a consistent controlled environment that you can repetitively run that QA process through. Lastly, bezel installation. Working with the customer, many times it's remote, so therefore we're not on site. And so with remote connectivity, the tools that we have today that didn't exist when I was young, makes it a whole lot easier for us to interact with the customer and control costs.
Glenn, you don't have to ship us cards anymore, like stacks of cards or floppy disks.
Hey, I go back before then. I remember when I worked with Timken and the mainframe computer and the size of the rooms, the 4381, etc. I think the computer room was about the size of the inside of this right here, which had all so you can see from a technological standpoint, this guy right here, the power that's within that versus what was in the power of that 4381, quite a significant difference. Questions as to what we've talked about at this point in time. I've had the opportunity to work with Tim, and there's been a number of things that have risen out of that. I know there's another customer that I've worked with that was in attendance to this meeting as well. So, yes, sir.
How are sales and engineering engagements priced?
A lot of that depends on when we talk about a sales pipeline, it's where we are in that pipeline. So if we go back up to the customer contact, all right, where we reach out there, obviously we're looking to understand what your needs are, and we're going to dialogue as we strive to resolve that issue. And when we get into this right here, we're probably going to be at that point in time looking to have you get some skin in the game. Gotcha. And so now we've had customers that have provided this. They said, "Hey, we've already got a process flow in place, and this is what we're looking to change." And sometimes it's a matter of a complete replacement, where they pull one out and put another in, versus they're saying, "Okay, this part works okay, but we want to go ahead and add to this, and we want to use the Bezlio side to do that." But usually when we get to this process here, then we're looking to get some for you to get some skin in the game. Yes, sir.
Do Bezlio sales engineers prefer that you provide them a flowchart, or is that something that is collaborated on between
Sure. If you have, I mean, quite frankly, we work with customers who don't have that skill set. They say, process flow, yeah, I can give you a napkin, and I can draw some things out on the napkin, and this is what I'm looking to do. versus the other side that says, yeah, we have individuals in here that we've already, a lot of times we've already got this flow, the rudimentary versus the full flow and already completed, and so they just share that with us.
How long does it take customers from inception of idea to that MVP?
Probably, obviously, the complexity of what you're looking to resolve the issue is because in this case here, the shipping bezel, it was when you go and you are in essence taking what's standard. We'll use the database, an ERP software as an illustration. If you're taking functionality which is standard in that ERP, and you're going to, in essence, replace it or render it immobile, that says, I'm not going to use that because it doesn't meet the process or my needs. So I'm going to go out here and, in essence, create my own, and I'm going to bolt that on. So now we have to look at what are we replacing, what transactions are involved, and so the complexity grows because if you're a standard boilerplate manufacturer, not a big deal. But if you're using what we call serialization or part trace, if you're using piece tracking, which is an item that could be in various lengths, then you start to introduce complexity, and so that will go ahead and add on to the tail end of that. But generally speaking, we know the back ends of the databases to the extent that we can go ahead and say, okay, we know what's going on over here, so we're going to have to go ahead and build our own transactionally.
There's two different things that kind of come into this that can sometimes make it a little bit more complex. Is that one, we digitize existing processes, so there's already a process in place, and we're just writing screens to flow with that. And there's another way where we come in and actually do process redesign. So like the shipping bezel and stuff like that. In that instance, none of that functionality existed. That wasn't how they were doing it. So we're coming in, creating a process, and then coming up with the software to enforce that process. But do you have some thoughts on like rough timing for people to get involved on something like this?
Yeah, I mean, like I think you could look at some of the ones that were done recently, and it's a matter of weeks, typically, than months. It's kind of a scale. One thing about Bezlio is like because you're working with something where the app is kind of on rails and the backend system's on rails, so you're working on the icing layer basically. Like things come together a lot faster, and they're also much more malleable. Like it doesn't look right in the first MVP,
Right.
Yeah.
So if you have someone to provide you with the correct queries,
Yeah.
does that help?
Sure.
I mean, really any sort of inputs in the process. One thing about it is like because we took our legacy consulting company and pivoted them into folks that do the sales and doing everything else, we are pretty good at like you don't have to spell everything out like you're talking to some straight up like software dev shop or something like that. We can be a little bit collaborative with you and suggest things, but certainly if you got the in-house capability and you're like, no, I want this way. That's great too.
So in regard to that, do you bill hourly or by the shot?
It all, like our traditional past, it actually can vary based off of your preference. There might be times where it's like, hey, you know what, I've got somewhere simple, I'd just like you to show me how to do it so I can do the next one. That would be best for an hour sort of thing. If you're saying, you know what, I appreciate that, didn't mess this thing first, you guys handle this first one, get a quick win or something like that, then we can just make that a firm contract and run with it. We're happy either way.
Some
A lot of people heading toward is the interest of like having us get in there, knock one out for them, and then you can decide from there like, yeah, I get this, I'm comfortable with this technology, and we have the bandwidth to manage it, or you get through it, you're like, yeah, this is just cool, we don't have the bandwidth to manage it, and we can keep going forward with it. But that's why we recently changed our sales process up, is because originally we were trying to provide a whole bunch of those prices up front. So people understood what it turned out to was like process redesign, digitizing existing process. The level of the technical expertise and involvement from each company was a little bit different. So we really started changing our selling methodology to focus on that first piece of like customer contact, understand what you're trying to do, understand the resources you have available and the bandwidth, so that we can start sizing these projects based on what the customers actually need and stop trying to build these like one size fits all because it was just too different each time.
The other thing I would say add to that too is like that, you know, we're not the only people that do this, and we intentionally want it that there's an entire ecosystem out there of people. So like Ryan, you know, does Leo work, for example, focus on the aerospace side of things, and you know, more and more that's what we're looking for is to enable that. You know, right now we're very good at it, we're happy to help do it, but ultimately we want competition and specialization more than anything else out there.
Yeah, it's nice. And on the other hand, you have consultants that try to board everything.
That's right. Yeah.
Well, before we leave that topic, one of the things that sometimes adds to the duration is when you're having to, I'll use the term uncharted waters, when you're having to go ahead and flow this out and then run that back against the customer and then let them go into a meeting. I mean, obviously interaction is dependent on their availability and our availability and things like that. So sometimes this can be a longer piece of the puzzle, just getting it to the point where, yep, that's what they say yes, or no, that's not what we really want. We want to do this or tweak. So it depends on where you are and the complexity of the issue that you're looking to resolve.
Have you had, well, actually I got two questions. First is it something like this, whether it's this one or some standardized flow that's out there, is that available along with a page or two about this is what we need answered when a flow chart is put together? And this is, just looking at this, it tells me a lot of, okay, here's what I probably should put together working with you guys.
Yeah, and again, it depends on the complexity of the issue. I mean, if it's something simple, there's times where we don't even go this route.
Okay.
But then there's times where we go this route and more to make sure that what we deliver is what you want.
Okay. And then sort of the second part of it, which is different with modeling. Have you found any good modeling techniques? And I'm talking about writing any codes, and I'll say create a PowerPoint, screen one, and
Yep.
to have a
Yeah, and I didn't include it in this one, and I could have and should have. But for instance, we have the Kevin. I'm not sure if Kevin is down here. There he is. Yes, Mr. Mansfield. We had before we even. I don't even know if we even made it to this point here. We gave him a rendition of what the GUI was going to look like. To get a feel for, is this what you're looking for? And so Kevin did some UX development, and then we said, okay, because they're looking at devices that they don't have today, and they're going to say, okay, I can visualize it, but can you show me what it's going to look like? And so we did that, and then we moved on to this step here.
Did you use Bezlio to do that?
I'll let Kevin respond to that. On Viking Air?
No, I just use graphics programs and I set up a process flow for the interface and stuff. But it's something we did in this case for that customer.
Okay.
I think that this is also, that's evolved quite a bit since like Adam and his team now, instead of having like, in a lot of instances, instead of having like a graphic designer do the UX, like Adam and his team will like, they'll mock up like the actual bezels in Bezlio itself so that you can see the user interface without necessarily having like the back-end wiring to it.
Right.
That way you can tweak the user experience first, and then once you're good with that, then we come back in and add all the plumbing and the piping to it. So this project has been going on for a little bit, but it's because it was a major process overall for this company as well. Like this replaced the entirety of their picking and shipping process. So that was a big evolution for them, and it took more work.
Can we lock that screen so I can jump off and grab something else? In other words, you can. I imagine we can, but I'm not sure on this. I know I worked with a lot of them where you can hold the screen so that I can jump off and do something different. But I don't know what that is. That's all right.
this? Like, is this what you have in mind? And if it said no, well, you can change it before you get into like it being complex to change it, which is when you have all the ERP logic added in.
You know, if you look at like some of those, you know, we were talking about design earlier, we're talking about variables, and they could be arrays and things like that, and whatever, stuff up, it could be arrays bar or something like that. Picking on you. But it's like, you know, you can make,
Bag off, right? Bag off.
Data, and that's what you're bound to, you know, so that you can knock something up that's like, you can actually let them play with it and say like, look, this isn't gonna punch back to Epicor or whatever yet. Let's just talk about the, you know, basic design aspect first. So it's a nice tool to like rapidly put something out like that.
So would it be more typical for Bezlio to write to its own database or the source that's free from the ERP database?
So Bezlio actually doesn't have a concept of its own database even. So you know, the closest thing we would have to that would be kind of the offline mode sort of, which we'll get into a little bit later as far as how that works. But Bezlio actually doesn't have a capability of storing any of its own data, so it has to be your backend systems that you can work to. So really, if you wanted to make it a straight up mock-up, you're kind of dealing with the volatile variable data where you just kind of go in and say like, I've got an array, it's like orange, apples, pears, and then like that's a drop down now, you know.
Sure. Yeah. You'd be obviously welcome to just create a blank SQL table. Or a lot of times, actually, when we're prototyping, we'll even read right from Excel because it's easiest to show. So we'll prototype it using like an Excel-based database, and then once we're ready, we'll switch it over to something that's a little bit more robust and real. But that way, somebody can just open up the Excel file and see it's right in the records and things like that.
Yeah. But do you like export like the CSV?
Look, we actually have a plugin wrapper for Excel, and you just pass it the path to it, and then you can either write data or read data from it. And you can do it pretty smooth.
Most all data looks the same as Bezlio. By the time it actually hits Bezlio, like an Excel file looks like a big JSON array, and you query from Epicor with a big JSON array, and Salesforce and stuff like that. So it's like there's only minor nuance that would actually let you, so actually swapping out the back end can actually be fairly, you know, simple, really.
Just to give you an idea, and I've been over the years, I've seen many islands of information, and they're outside of the database. It could be an Access, Excel, you name it. And so what we do is we work with the back end of the database, and we'll create custom tables to hold data. So from a Bezlio standpoint, if you want to look at that, you know, does Bezlio have a database? No, but we use your existing database, your existing back end, and we'll create tables. In this case here, there's 2 tables that we created to hold the information as the shipment was being made, because we had to tie information together so that that item that was picked wasn't shipped on a different order. Okay. Other questions?
Comment on Glenn's monster query that it had up there.
It can. When you're having to do complex queries to get information that you're going to do something with, those are some of the things that you're going to look at. But yes.
It actually uses the SQL driver itself. Yeah. You have access to everything that SQL Server is capable of, including, you know, crazy things like wild subqueries and stuff like that. Yeah.
All right, let's go back down here. So from a process flow standpoint, I find that this works well because it's a discussion. I've created hundreds of these, and some of these are, I mean, you can chase your tail in a heartbeat trying to work down through these. But if they're in plain English and you're not, I detest things like this here where you're doing crossovers, because I don't like that. But sometimes that's the only way you can do that. But if we put together a document like this, then that certainly makes it much easier for the developer to understand and work towards. Certainly, we can stop with, I should back up here, certainly we can stop with that document there, but there are times where we have to then go much deeper into a design spec and to make aware of what we're doing to the back end of the database or how we're utilizing the back end of your ERP, in this case, the SQL Server database. So a design spec, a lot of times we'll put together a design spec. And then that way, that's a document that you have, and you can refer to it at will. Other questions? Questions about the development or the QA process? Questions about the installation process? Because if not, we're at that level there.
All right. That's good. Thanks, Glenn.
Right? Seth has a question.
Oh, I ruined it.
Ah.
Sorry. This is just a dumb question. What's the best way you like to receive feedback, QA feedback on how bug reports, things like that? Do you have a specific process in place, or is it literally just emails or phone calls?
Yes and yes and yes. It depends on what the customer, some of their modes of communication are. I like to be structured. I think you know how you've been around me long enough to know that I'm fairly structured. And so if it's sitting in an email in my inbox, it's going to sit there until it's resolved. And so generally speaking, we do have that, but we're working on some other tools by which to exploit current technology.
We talked a few times about the support.bezlio website. That's going through a bit of an overhaul right now. Kind of in short, what we found is we've got this really big table of contents that breaks down. Think about like as an Epicor user, kind of stuff you're interested in is like completely different than somebody's using it for Salesforce or whatever. So we need to have like an in-depth like chapter structure sort of thing baked into it. So that's one of the biggest overhauls you're going to be seeing. We're going to kind of have to contract that out, which is actually more complicated to fix that than we are able to deal with. But one of the aspects to that site is you can log into it. You get the little login link. If you're not already registered, you click the link in it. Once you create an account, and when you're logged in, we've got case management in there for basically like, I want to create a new support case. I can search through my historical ones. We're also going to be working on making that have like a community aspect. You know, one of the things that we run into is like, let's say somebody makes a really cool shipping bezel that you can take a picture and it attaches it to the pack with or whatever. We want to make a nice ecosystem for people to be able to share those things with each other, because that's ultimately how the community gets built. So right now, the way support.bezlio is built on top of the Salesforce product. So we got to configure it a little bit more. It's not quite ready for you all to have great experiences yet.
Prime time, right? Okay. All right. Thank you.
All right.